All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Make sure at the bottom of the screen to choose that globe icon and hit that interpretation button and choose your language. Otherwise, there's problems. It's happened to me before. It was a little tricky, so make sure to choose the language. And then we will go ahead and get started with our, I don't even know what number this is, but our District Parent Advisory Committee meeting for January 26th. We're super happy that you're all here today. For those of you that will be joining us at home watching later, we hope that it's informative and helpful. And if you have additional questions, you can shoot them to me. You can shoot them to Dr. Rutia, because he's going to be our main speaker today. You can send it to anyone. They all know how to get a hold of us. So thank you very much. And thank you all for being here today. So really quickly, I feel like sometimes we have new parents, sometimes we have older parents, not sure what we do, but I'd like to make sure that you all know what DPAC is and what DPAC does. So DPAC is the district, for our whole district, parent advisory committee from all of the schools. We provide input on the Title I budget. We give input to the LCAP and to our district family engagement plan, which is kind of one of our big goals for the district. But the topic for today, or the area that we'll be focusing on today, is that we also get to give district-wide input on anything, but especially related to low-income, underperforming students. And COVID is definitely, we're almost 2 years in. This is just par for the course, what we need to talk about. And I asked Dr. Rutia to speak to us today on just kind of our evolving protocols on what's going on. I put together a little thing for us, and Dr. Rutia can correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's here. He is. Good to see you, Dr. Rutia.
Hi, Sonny. Hi, everybody.
Morning.
So we're going to go ahead. We're going to get started. Kind of the first thing that we like to do in these meetings. Oh, anyway, this is us. So I'm the president. My name is Sunny. Jessica is our vice president, and Mindy is our secretary. Our terms are up in June, just so you all know. And that means that we're going to need people that want to do this. And we are happy to talk to you and encourage you, but I think elections are up, maybe not next meeting, but the meeting after that. So if you're thinking about you would like to do this job, I'm not going to. So we need you. So I thought we always like to do introductions, again, pre-COVID. We met in I think it's you could chat with people and get to know people. We're still on Zoom, but hopefully sometime we'll be able to do this in person again. So I like to get to know people. I like to make sure that we all know each other. So you guys can put this in the chat if you can go ahead and speak. Again, my name is Sunny Tamrakar. My kids both go to Smith. They're in first grade and in third grade. And so my first grader has been adjusting to actually going to school. And our question for today is, do you understand what to do when your child has a COVID exposure? And I have read through it, and I was like, I think I kind of get it, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to discuss it today. And if anyone's got questions, you can let me know. So if you want to go ahead and put that in the chat, or if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, we would love to meet you all.
Okay, I guess I'll start. My name is Brandon Church. My daughter is in second grade at William Green Elementary. As to what to do with our child who has COVID exposure, I believe I have a pretty good understanding. My daughter actually just recently has been in close contact at least 3 times in the last 5 days or something like that. So she's fully vaccinated. So from what I understand, there was an option to keep her in school if she was fully vaccinated, or to pull her out. We opted to pull her out and get her tested. And then there was some sort of kind of like a temporary homeschool program that they had available. So from what I understand, that is how it's going. That's what we're doing right now, but I'm sure Dr. Rita can explain more.
Thanks so much, Brandon. We appreciate it. We're glad you're here. Oh, Jessica, maybe you can, if there's anything in the chat, would you read those for me? It's a little hard for me to see those.
Okay. Mia Ramos, that just says Spanish. And then Brenda Z just said, welcome everyone. I work in educational services. My name is Brenda Cepeda. And basically it's in the chat.
Well, all right. I think that everyone's feeling a little quiet this morning. I think that's okay. Oh, is there a new one in the chat? I think there's a new one. Go ahead and grab that one.
Yes. So it says, my name is Carol. My kids are 3rd and give me 1 second. I just moved. Okay. So it says, my name is Carol. My kids are 3rd and 5th at Anderson Elementary. And yes, we have all been quarantined because of close contacts. That's from Carol Birch. And then I have from Jocelyn Rivera. She says, I work in the student support service. I understand the necessary steps when students have a COVID exposure. And then Mylette says she has a 3rd grade in Anderson Elementary School. I have some knowledge of COVID exposure, but it is great to hear from the experts what it means and how it's handled nowadays. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you guys all for, again, just introducing yourselves. Now I know who I'm talking to. So kind of our plan for today is just a quick COVID update and a kind of a presentation with a Q&A with our risk and safety our communication and safety director. He keeps just getting more jobs. So it's hard for me to keep track. So really quickly, I don't think anything has changed from the last DPAC meeting in terms of our protocols that I am aware of. We're limiting visitors on campus. Omicron is now everywhere, as opposed to like almost 2 months ago when it was just starting to pop up. Vaccinations are available for children 5 and up. And we were thinking that there might be a winter surge, and I definitely think that there was, and now it's potentially receding. I pulled this data from a Google Sheets that I quite like, that I can share in the chat with everyone, which I think is, I don't know, I've looked at a couple of different things, and the one that speaks to me the best is this one, because I can mess with all the data, or I can look at all the data. And you can see this is kind of where we are now. And this is for LA County. And you can see the last 30 days, kind of how quickly it's kind of come up. And then it looks like it's kind of coming down. But I think Dr. Rutia can definitely tell us what this all means. So I am going to pass it to him if anyone doesn't have any other questions or thoughts before we get started. Going once, going twice. All right. Well then, let me welcome our Director of Safety and Communication. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sunny, and I'm happy to be here. I appreciate, I've said it before, the commitment to be here today, take time out of your day to be involved, and DPAC's just another one of those groups that that are absolutely essential for our community, for our school community. So again, appreciate all of you for being here today. Thank you for the fantastic introduction. Really, Sunny, you covered everything I was going to talk about, so I'll just stop and go. No, I do have a slide deck. Dr. Kane did ask if I wanted to go over the comprehensive school safety plan. I have a few slides on that. I'm happy to do that. I've been going around to school site councils to just give a quick update on that piece. But if we just want to talk about COVID, I could just stick to that. So I'll pose that question and act accordingly.
I would say you could totally, if you want to go over the school safety plan, I'm sure that's going to have at least some COVID related things, and then we can kind of go into the other part after.
All right, so let me jump into that. So I have a few slides on COVID, and I'll go quickly through the comprehensive school safety plan. It's pretty routine on that piece. So let me share my screen. One sec. Too many windows. Okay. Sunny, can I get a thumbs up? Looks good. Got it. Okay. So very quickly, so many of you probably have seen this slide deck before. It's pretty similar, but you know, each year we take a look at our school safety plans, and we update accordingly, get some stakeholder input and whatnot. Obviously, the last 2 years has not been so much focused on earthquakes and fire drills and things like that. More about the pandemic, of course. So we did do some updates last year on the pan flu front, just to have some general protocols for responding to a pan flu. So I'll cover that in a slide shortly. But just to give you, a quick overview, we have a robust PBIS program. Our board and district leadership prioritize school safety. And in fact, it's one of our goals. I believe it's district goal number 4. And that's to invest in optimal learning environments that enhance student learning and ensure safety. So we've worked hard to consolidate our goals and ensure everything we do is making efforts towards achieving those goals. So our partnerships with local stakeholders, safety, law enforcement. I'm sure many of you know Deputy Hilliard. He's been our SRO via the LA County Sheriff's Department for a long time now, and he's been a great resource in terms of helping us navigate some of our law enforcement needs and whatnot. And of course, there's me, my position. That's another investment in school safety. So going into the actual plans, the CSSPs, it's a statutory requirement. It's an ed code. Education code is the legal language that kind of dictates a lot of how school districts function and operate. Some required components of the CSSP is data associated with assessing school climate, local crime data in and around the city, as well as in our schools, various reporting procedures such as child abuse reporting, procedures for ingress and egress, which is entering, exiting, etc., school discipline. A lot of this is derived from either ed code, board policy, administrative regulations. So it's those bigger picture documents that we have that rule how we operate. And what I do is consolidate those into a plan, everything safety. And so again, a lot of this is already created. It's just making a document to consolidate all that. So again, we update it each year, and then we take a look at some of our data. So here's suspension and expulsion. This is one of the key data points associated with assessing school climate. And so across the district, you can see our suspension and expulsions numbers. And I believe this is for the prior school year. I want to point out on some of these lines, you'll see a higher number. In some cases, it could be 1 or 2 students that are having multiple suspensions. And so the numbers are a little high at some of our schools. Middle schools are pretty in line. As a statewide average, we're under the statewide average in California. So that's our suspension and expulsion data. If you have any questions on that, I'm sure your site principal would be able to clarify any particular concerns or details. Another piece is our facilities. So Lawndale's made a significant investment in making sure our facility conditions are where we want them to be. So in the last few years, we've seen new roofs, paint projects, etc., to ensure that our classrooms are up to par of where we want them to be. The latest round is obviously a big focus on our HVAC systems, making sure that our classrooms have fresh, clean, filtered air. And so we made a pretty substantial investment in ensuring that our HVAC units are have higher filter quality and whatnot. So I'm sure you've seen previous presentations and messaging on some of the actions we've taken in that area. I want to note these yellow, the ones that are highlighted yellow, those are upgrades from the last time the site was inspected, meaning that the condition has improved. And so most of our schools in the exemplary category, with 2 in the good category. How this works, there's something called a fit inspection tool where our maintenance director goes around, follows this statewide, countywide tool that has various parameters for how to grade the facility conditions. One of our schools, FDR, is actually inspected by the county. So somebody from the county comes out and does the inspection. So this last year they got an exemplary, which is fantastic. So we'll continue making efforts to keep our schools in good condition, particularly given how old they are. They're older buildings. So shout out to our maintenance team and all of our business team for keeping those schools in good condition. Local crime data. So this is as of last year in the city of Lawndale. So 155 violent crimes, 494 property crimes. So you see the totals there. And then what we do is take a ratio of per 1,000 residents and kind of measure that versus similar populations. So, Lawndale is about 2 square miles, just under 40,000 residents. I believe property crimes has gone up a bit given the last 2 years, but that's another data point that we look at to assess our climate within our CSSPs. Now moving into the actual drills and the procedures. One area that we work in is obviously the great shakeout we have each year. Earthquakes, we duck, cover, and evacuate. Test the fire alarm. We practice fire drills, and then a lockdown, lockout was a new one. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. I think everyone's familiar with them. Lockout, lockdown is essentially there's danger outside or inside or nearby. It could be nearby police activity, where we want to move our students inside just in case something were to come onto campus. So those are pretty straightforward. Evacuation and shelter, 2 other procedures that we practice. Evacuation, if there's a fire or earthquake, we move somewhere else. It's usually on campus out in a big open area, but sometimes it could be a plan B location. It could be off-site, depending on the nature of the event. And then shelter in place, of course, is if there's an external health hazard. So if you live around the Torrance refinery, for example, and some toxic fumes were released from the refinery, that'd be an example of shelter in place. So we have procedures in place to address those 4 main threats. At our schools, we also have supplies. So we have safety sheds with food, water, and search and rescue materials so that we're able to sustain our population for up to 48 hours. And then in our classrooms, we also have lockdown kits that have those supplies so that we can duct tape windows and vents if there's a shelter in place due to external health hazard, food, water, and then it also doubles as a toilet just in case the classroom doesn't have a toilet built in and the students are there for a long period of time. Fortunately, we've not had to use that feature, but we're well equipped just in case it is needed. Other emergencies, so this is the pan flu piece of this. Essentially a pan flu or pandemic influenza is any sort of seasonal illness where there's an outbreak where there's no immunity against it. So we've all experienced this. I think we all have a new vocabulary from all of this. So in our in our CSSP, we have a generic pan flu response that has its 5 main priorities listed, and this was developed based on some guidance that the CDC releases each year. So we'll keep that updated accordingly. And then just some quick safety updates. You'll see the Raptor visitor management system is rolling out. So when we do have the ability to have volunteers and whatnot on campus, we have a very quick digital system that will print out a little badge. So if you're familiar with some of our neighboring school districts, I'm sure a lot of you have maybe seen this before. You just drop in a photo ID and it prints out a badge. If you don't have a photo ID, there's a manual process for that. We also are updating our emergency procedure flip chart. So we'll have the brand new flip charts in our classrooms, and they have all the procedures in writing hanging on the wall ready to go. And then we're in the early stages of an IT clock system, which would essentially modernize our clock system. What that'll do is if there's a need for an earthquake or a lockdown or lockout, we're able to make that announcement, and it'll actually visually show up on the screen. And it also in the same message will be sent outside as well, outside the classroom. So right now we have a phone system that we do that from, an all-call system. This would be hardwired, built into the wall essentially. So you'll see more info on that coming. So some exciting things in the COVID front and the safety front. Now let's go into the COVID updates. So Sunny's data is great. I made a copy of that document, but this one's some data from the New York Times. Of course, all of it's sourced from LA County, but I wanted to give you an idea of kind of where we have been. Obviously, November and December. Back in November, I think is when Sunny invited me, and he was asking questions like, can parents come on campus, and can we do field trips? And then those questions, as we got to January, those started to change because there's obviously more concern with where we're at. So obviously, as a district, we kind of were waiting to see if are we having a winter surge, or are we going to stay at these levels here? And you can see we did have a winter surge. So largely, our protocols have remained the same since we've reopened, and that has been beneficial because we've not really seen transmission or a high number of cases in our schools. Of course, when we hit January, huge surge. There's a lot of community spread happening in LA County, and Omicron is shown to be a little more infectious than the previous variants. So we want to be cautious and mindful. So I have a few recommendations that I'll get to. But what I wanted to point out is the curve is bent, and so public health experts are Dr. Frere, Dr. Gilcheck. We have a weekly call with them. They're optimistic that this curve is heading down. And if we look at what's happening in the East Coast, New York is 10 days ahead of us. Their cases are falling very quickly. Their new cases per day. So we hope that's the same here, and we'll see that shortly. I wanted to give a quick update on vaccination rates. So this is another data dashboard that LA County Department of Public Health has. You can see the vaccination rate of our neighboring areas. These are all school districts. And so Lawndale's this little squarish shape here. And you can see we're kind of on the lower end for the ages 5 to 11 with at least one dose. LA County is seeing about 25%. So it should be a little higher now. This data is as of January 2nd. And then, of course, LESD, we have access to that data. Again, it's from the county. It's one of the dashboards they have. We're seeing around a 20% vaccination rate for that age group. 12 to 17 in the county as a whole, about 81%. And then if we zoom in a bit for that age group, it's about 75%. So this has obviously for 12 to 17 has been available longer. The 5 to 11, I think, came out in now November-ish. With time, we'll see if these vaccination rates change. We are planning to host, I figured this might be one of the questions, we are planning to host additional clinics. A lot of our providers are working on testing. Obviously, there's huge testing demand this month. And so we're hopeful that their availability frees up in February, and we'll be able to host additional vaccine clinics. So I think we've done 4 or 5 so far, focused on our students. Back in March when school staff had access to the vaccine, we hosted a few and in partnership with the Beach Cities Health District. So I think to date we're probably have given out several thousand vaccines to our community. So we'll see where that goes. And I wanted to talk a little bit about boosters. So Just a note that here's the booster eligibility table. This is available from the CDC website, and you can see some middle school students may be becoming eligible. That's now the recommendation is 5 months after completing your primary series. So if it's been 5 months since your second dose, you're eligible. For Moderna, obviously that was only available for 18 and older, same recommendation. And then the recommendation for Johnson & Johnson there. This gets really confusing when you hear 4th dose, for some patients that are maybe immunocompromised and whatnot. So I know this gets, so the new language that public health is using is current, but again, we'll monitor this and communicate it out accordingly. Now on to COVID testing. So, we've worked with our vendors and our public health partners, as well as the state on trying to procure more test kits. So, before the surge occurred, LESD did procure its own set of test kits, and we passed them out to families. We did 2 distributions during right before winter break on the 17th, and then again during winter break. And I believe we gave out over 700, which would have been about 1,400 tests. There's 2 in a box. And then the state announced a program to provide every K-12 student in California with one of these home test kits. So we received an additional 4,000 or so to match our enrollment numbers and pass those out to families earlier in the month. At the time, there was so much testing demand and not enough testing that we wanted to get those kits out to families as soon as we could, and they were used with good purpose. We also provided a rapid test clinic on the Sunday before we came back. We saw just over 600 attendees. So we had a long line, but it was moving, and we got through most of the people that were there for testing. And again, this is just another sign that at the time there was not enough testing locations. We used to have the Forum, for example, was a large testing site, and a lot of those kind of went away. If you look back at those numbers, you can see why the surge really ramped up very quickly, and it took our county and our state some time to get those testing sites, more testing capacity in the county. And then Fulgent has done over 1,300. I know one of Sunny's questions was the lines that we had. The first day, the first week we were back, Fulgent, I think was able to get through 690 individuals that Wednesday, which is really impressive. And another sign that there wasn't a lot of testing options within our community. People needed testing. And so we're happy to be able to provide that. I know myself and Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Jansen, and a few of our other staff got some computers going, and we're helping with registration that day to get the line moving a little quicker. So, most people were very appreciative, even though that there was a 1 or 2 hour wait. They're very appreciative of having the option because there was just nowhere to get appointments or anything. So to your question, Sunny, the demand has tapered off a bit because there's a lot more testing options. I want to say it's probably last week was no more than 20 to 30 minute wait or so. And so I would expect the same for today. I know folks are actually lining up as early as 8 or 9 a.m., even though we don't start till 11. But after that morning wave is done, the end of the testing day last week, they actually had no lines. So it was just you walk up and you're done. So their capacity is back to, I guess, what you would expect. And then today, I think is over 12,000. I'm losing track, but just in the month of January, that's pretty impressive for a district our size. So the other important thing to go through is the isolation and quarantine guidelines. So this is probably the biggest thing for parents and our staff, really everyone, to understand the challenges we hear. When the CDC says something, it gets on the news cycles, And it may not be true for schools. So the last time the CDC changed this to a shorter quarantine, they changed it. It used to be 14 days, then it was 10 days, then it was 5 if you test, and strings attached. So the CDC announced the 5-day quarantine and isolation. Well, then the State Department of Public Health has to review that and then make changes. After that happens, then the County Department of Public Health have to review that and make changes. So, we really want to message out that we want to follow what we have here. And if you hear or see something on the news, it may not actually apply to schools. LA County can be more restrictive. They have health orders for the entire county, but then they also have health orders for schools. And typically the school protocols are stricter than what you would find generally in the county. So this is what we're following. This is for isolation. There's two different definitions here, and they're often used interchangeably. They're not. Isolation is for somebody who has symptoms or tested positive. Quarantine is different. Quarantine is for somebody who had exposure. And so just talking about isolation, there's kind of two tracks here. There's symptomatic and asymptomatic. So just talking about symptomatic is somebody has a new cough or diarrhea, vomiting, a fever, or some other symptom of concern. They get tested, they learn it's COVID, and this is the timeline. So as soon as you have symptoms, you stay home and isolate. You stay away from others, you isolate. Day 0 is the symptom onset date. So even if you have symptoms, so if I have symptoms today and I go get a test tomorrow, Day 0 is the date I had symptoms, because that's when the timeline started. Day 1 is the first full day after symptom onset. So if you go and take a test, you still go back to Day 0 when I had symptoms. The earlier return for isolation, so you can return sooner if you test, and that's on Day 6. If you test on Day 5, and that test on Day 5 is negative, and symptoms have improved, and you've been fever-free for 24 hours without the use of Tylenol, fever-reducing medication. What's important is the antigen test is recommended. For people who test positive for COVID, you can test positive via PCR test multiple times. So even though my 10 days is up, if I take a PCR again, it's such a sensitive test that I'm likely to test positive for upwards of a month potentially. So really you want to take an antigen test, which is better at kind of determining whether you're infectious or not. The PCR test is really good at finding that RNA for COVID inside your body anywhere. It's really sensitive. So if you want to follow this earlier timeline, antigen test is recommended on Day 5. If that one's negative, then you can return on Day 6 with the other parameters there. Somebody doesn't test, they choose not to test, then the full 10-day isolation is required. Now the asymptomatic path, the only difference here is Day 0, you didn't know you had COVID because you had no symptoms. So you took a routine test just because, and you learned that test was positive. So Day 0 is the test that is the day you took the test. Day 1's the first full day after the test. And then the same timeline here and the same recommendation with an antigen test. Antigen test is like the at-home rapid test. Some clinics offer antigen testing. One downside is if you go to a clinic, I don't believe insurance covers antigen testing, only PCR testing. So it's just something to be aware of and check on. The at-home rapid test kits, the USPS and other places, it's good to have a few on hand just in case you need them. So that's isolation. I'll move over to quarantine. This is for somebody who's had close contact to a positive case, but there's a few strings to that. Close contact is somebody who is less than 6 feet for 15 or more cumulative minutes over a 24-hour period, and during the infectious period. The infectious period is 2 days prior to symptom onset or date of positive test. So if you had somebody come over to your house and then 2 days later they say, uh-oh, I had symptoms and I tested positive, they were at your house during the infectious period, even though they didn't have symptoms at the time. So that's the close contact definition that has not changed throughout this entire pandemic. And that's what we follow when we do contact tracing. People that are exempt from quarantine, this is based on public health guidance and data that suggests that these people that meet this criteria have enough protection to statistically, I guess, not succumb to infection. So that's anyone who is fully vaccinated for students or have tested positive within the last 90 days and recovered. And usually that's confirmed via a positive test result or such. The requirements for that, so you don't have to quarantine, you're not required to quarantine, but you have to remain asymptomatic, self-monitor for symptoms for 14 days. So if you start feeling off, that's when you need to move into isolation and test to confirm. Wear a well-fitting mask, and then testing 3 to 5 days from exposure is recommended. There was a brief period of time where it was recommending that you take a test right away, but the best window of time is 3 to 5 days from exposure. Not exempt from quarantine is anyone who's unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated. So if a student has only had 1 dose, they're not fully vaccinated. Or somebody experiencing symptoms. Again, then you go to the isolation protocols.
Excuse me, Dr.
Yes.
Riccia, just really quickly about that test 3 to 5 days after exposure. Is that an antigen test or is it a PCR test?
Either one, I would probably recommend PCR, unless you have a reason that you test positive because you had COVID. I think for fully vaccinated, I would go with PCR. For somebody who tested positive within the last 90 days, I'd probably look at a rapid test. Because again, if you've had COVID in the past 90 days, there's a possibility you'll keep testing positive for a while. So you want to do an antigen test. Our Fulgent site on Wednesday, that is PCR testing. So that's the gold standard. That's the best way to rule in or out of COVID diagnoses. So feel free to utilize that option. And then the not exempt from quarantine is, again, not unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated, or somebody experiencing symptoms. And the requirements are you stay home in quarantine, and it's very similar to the isolation requirements. So day 0 is, I guess, important note, day 0 is last date of exposure to the positive case. So if you live in the house with a positive case, your day 0 resets every single day because that person's not fully isolated and you're not fully quarantined. You're interacting with them. So unless they can go live in a separate unit or somewhere else, it's very difficult to remove that exposure. So that means your day 0 will continue until that person exits isolation. So when this person exits isolation, either the full 10 days or the day 5 and they exit on day 6, your day 1 won't start until their day 6 or their day 11, depending on if they test or not.
Okay, that's new news to me. So I'm just want to make sure I understand. If my child, or if I have COVID, let's say that I have COVID and I am isolated in my room, but the kids still live in my house, their day 0 continues to reset until day 6 and I am testing negative or and asymptomatic. Is that correct? Right.
So, there's some cases where perhaps you are fully isolated, but in most cases there's still sharing of restrooms, sharing of air. You're not fully truly isolated. So some of it's on a case-by-case basis. We've had scenarios where the person who was positive, they moved into the garage, and so they are isolated. The garage was fully equipped with their own restroom and kitchenette and all that. But typically, though, if somebody in your household's positive, that whole household should quarantine and follow the protocols accordingly. The challenge is, again, that day 0 continues because you still have exposure. When somebody's within a household, it's really hard to truly isolate. And with that, one other recommendation is I'm sure you've seen the news and other places recommending to upgrade your mask. So for students, we really recommend using the medical grade one. Ideally, something that is well-fitting. Every child has, some of smaller faces, larger faces. So whatever's the best fitting one, and then it has a nose wire, so you can really get a seal around it. So this is what public health is recommending. The kind of the medical grade mask doesn't have to be blue, but I think they're just doing that for our sake of explanation. So that's recommended for students. It's required for school staff. So school staff are required to wear a medical grade mask. And even better yet, if you want a double mask, so wear the medical grade underneath like a filter, and then the cloth mask over it. There's KN95 and N95 options. I don't want to give a recommendation for that for students. I'll leave that to parent choice, partly because these are technically respirators. And so when you have a respirator, you get into some other requirements. If somebody has pulmonary issues and you wear a respirator, a well-fitting respirator for the full day, you could have, pulmonary issues and difficulty breathing and whatnot. So I'll leave that to parent choice, pediatrician recommendations, or however you want to approach that. But we really want to move to the medical grade, the 3-layer, to test if if you have a good one, is if you try to take a bead of water, run a bead of water, and if it doesn't absorb, it's a good mask. If it beads and it runs off, it's a good mask. If it does absorb, it's not a good mask. Sorry, I mixed that up. So you want it to bead and run off. That's kind of a quick test. And I think that's it. I just want to point out, this is one of the documents that I try to translate into a nice little picture, because there's a lot here, and I don't think parents are necessarily going to read this. So maybe Sunny, but I just wanted to point that out, that we really try to translate it into something simpler, but it's gotten a lot more complex lately. It used to be just straight 14 days, and it was 10 days, and all those factors. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Sunny, and if there's any questions or anything that I could answer now, I will. If not, I'm happy to follow up.
I mean, I have a million questions, so I'll let other people go first, and then I can jump in. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Rutia?
I have a question.
Fantastic, go for it.
Okay, my question is, you know how you send an email every time you guys have a positive case? And I noticed that those numbers reset. So I guess I'm confused as why today, like when are they resetting, after the 14-day or weekly or?
Yeah, so it's been 14 days. We established the dashboard back in August before we started school. And of course, then there was just, a handful of cases here and there. Now with the surge, I know a lot of districts are actually challenged with the dashboard. I saw Santa Ana just remove theirs entirely. I heard a few other districts have just stopped reporting numbers just because of the volume. And they're actually looking back at whether it's 14 days. I know some districts moved to 10 days. So for us, thank you, Sunny. It is a 14-day period because that's one of the recommendations from public health, and it's more of a meaningful measurement in terms of outbreak and whatnot. So these cases, if you scroll down a little bit more, I did put underneath the table that cases older than 14 days had been removed, just because the numbers did come down a bit. We had a large influx of cases back in the first week of school. Obviously, we're on, I think, week 3 now. And so those numbers have fallen, and that could have been a student went to school the first day or two, they got their at-home rapid test, and they took it and it was positive, and maybe they were asymptomatic, various scenarios for that. But we try to be as transparent as possible with this. It's not cumulative because that's not really meaningful for current data. It's been just on a rotating 14-day period. So if a case was on there from Monday the 3rd, it fell off on 2 weeks later, the 18th, if that's right.
Got it. Thank you.
I like your picture too.
Thank you.
Anyone else got questions?
Might be all you, Sonny.
All right. Well, my question is actually about masks. And trying to weigh kind of the two things. Double masking is better. Cloth masks are not as good. But it like for my children, the surgical masks, they like it's completely open on the sides. And so we've been using like really well-fitting cloth masks that have the water beads or whatever. So is that is fit more important or the type of mask more important?
Yeah, there's I would say fit is huge. Fit is probably the biggest component, and the ability to kind of close it off. So fit and sealing it off, in addition to layers. So ideally you want it to be more than one layer. So like the neck gaiters that people were using early on, typically those were not more than one layer, and so they're really thin. If you have a mask that's well fitting and it has layers, I'd say use that. There's no requirement for students to wear the medical grade mask. Even better is the double masking. If your children could wear surgical underneath like a filter, and then I know you said opens on the side, the cloth mask theoretically should help get a better seal. And so I found that in my own personal use with using the surgicals, like obviously they do kind of open, but when I put a cloth mask over it, it does push it in a little more. Oh, you're muted. You're still muted.
Oh, Sonny, we can't hear you. You're muted. Come on back.
Sorry. Let me try that again. I got a lot of information today. Thank you so much. I had two questions, one regarding kind of like vaccination and whether or not if it slows transmission. So it seems like there was a very low percentage of our our 5 through 11-year-olds that have been vaccinated as of whenever the date was, the 2nd. So if we were to have a higher vaccination rate, would that mean that our transmission rate might be lower? Like if you're vaccinated, you are better protected or you spread it less?
Yeah, that's essentially what public health has been saying on our calls. I think they said somebody who is boosted is 4 times less likely to come down with a COVID infection. And I think for somebody fully vaccinated, it's 2 times. And then it goes down from there. And so that's been the recommendation. And I believe they've stated in one of their calls that what they're seeing in classrooms is the students that are fully vaccinated are still in class essentially. So their data is showing that the vaccines are effective at what you just asked. So the best source of information is going to CDC or LA County Department of Public Health and taking a look at some of their data and what they found in that regard.
Perfect. And then my other question, just to make sure I have it straight. So my kids are fully vaccinated. If they're fully vaccinated and they have a close contact and they are asymptomatic and test negative, they can go back to school the next day.
If they're fully vaccinated and had a close contact, they are exempt from quarantine.
But if my child was not fully vaccinated and they have a close contact, then they have to wait 5 days and then retest on 6, or 10 days and they'll have to retest.
It depends on when the exposure date was. Sometimes we learn of exposure, we learn of a positive case maybe on a Monday or a Tuesday, and the exposure happened on a Thursday or Friday, depending on when the parents got a test. So depending on the timeline, yes, you would test on day 5. If that one's negative, you can return on day 6.
So it seems like to me that if your children are fully vaccinated, they can attend, they miss less school. Is that correct?
Right.
If they're fully vaccinated, they are both less likely to spread it, less likely to get as sick, although children don't seem to get as sick. And they can go back to school sooner rather than if your children are unvaccinated.
Correct.
Okay. And again,
I have a question. So are we saying now that vaccinated children don't get COVID? Because I hope that we're not saying that, because that's not necessarily true.
I think it's just statistical. From Sunny's analogy. That's somebody who's fully vaccinated can get COVID. People who are boosted are getting COVID. But I think what to Sunny's point is that it's statistically, I guess, less likely based on the data.
But the recent data isn't saying that. I mean, there are multiple people getting COVID that have been fully vaccinated, boosted, and all. I just want to make sure that we're 100% clear. Like it's not the vaccine isn't not going to make you not get COVID.
I don't think there's anything that would prevent anyone from coming down with any sort of disease or illness. There's no magic shield or anything like that.
Correct.
Yeah.
all right. Are there any other questions before we move on?
I do. I actually have a couple of questions.
Please feel free.
My first question is, I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. I do want to get my daughter vaccinated. She's actually 7 years old. And I want to know how soon can she be vaccinated after testing positive?
Yeah, that's a good question, because public health has indicated that doctors have had a wide range of recommendations. Some have said, 90 days after getting COVID to get vaccines and boosters. They're working on better messaging to primary care providers. I would probably defer to your pediatrician or your provider, but I'm not aware of a hard timeline. I think the last recommendation I saw was maybe 2 weeks, but again, that's probably a better question for your provider, just to confirm.
Got it. Okay. And then my other question is, if my daughter got a Pfizer vaccine at the beginning of the pandemic, this is my other daughter, and can she get, if she got a J&J vaccine, can she get a Pfizer booster?
I think they have guidance that actually allows you to mix and match the boosters now. Let me, you could ask your next question. Let me Google that and I'll share the link.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was actually my second question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Daniel, I thought your slide that you showed earlier showed that about which ones you could mix and match. Because I was looking at that too.
Yeah, that was for the boosters.
Oh,
Are you asking for first dose Moderna, second dose Pfizer, for example? Or are you asking for boosters?
For boosters, actually, because my daughter, she got vaccinated early on in the pandemic, and she got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Mhm.
And but now she wants to get boosted, but she's not sure which one to get. And she's actually more fond of getting either Pfizer or Moderna.
Yeah, I guess I wish I had that option to mix and match when it's fairly new. It's a fairly new recommendation. I just put a link in the chat. It's the same table that I shared a little earlier, but it shows you when you're eligible, and then it shows you which booster you can get.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and continue on. Thank you so much, Dr. Richia, for coming and speaking today. We really, really appreciate it. If anyone wants to, has further questions, again, you can email him directly. Let me see if I can pull up. I don't think, did I not put his email address on there? You can find it on the district website, or you can email me or anyone here.
Oh,
Or I think maybe Dr. Richia will put it in the chat.
I think I have one question before you go.
Oh, perfect. Go for it.
Yes, I was wondering if a child is not vaccinated at all, can that child get a booster, just the booster?
Again, probably a question for a pediatrician. I don't think so. I think eligibility depends on having first and second dose in a 2-dose series or the 1 dose. I suppose, there's the first dose option. I know Moderna's booster is a slightly less concentration. And then Pfizer, I think, is just a 3rd shot. It's all the same. But that's probably a question for your provider or whoever's administering the vaccine.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay, and then in the chat, I think that, oh, I can't read who that was. Carol said that she wanted to let everyone know that Medi-Cal is going to pay for rapid antigen tests at clinics. She's having one done today. So just so everyone knows. And then we're going to wrap up here just really quickly. Again, thank you, Dr. Richia. And if you've got other questions, you can go ahead and email him directly. You can email us and we'll make sure he gets it. We have a school board meeting, oh goodness, next Thursday. And again, for those of you that missed the last one, they're going to talk about translation services like we have for DPAC and DELAC. They're going to talk about it and they're going to have a study session on it in addition to virtual comments. So I would highly recommend you go attend, watch on YouTube, email the board. I do it. They all know me. But it's a great way to make sure that your voice is heard kind of on the upper levels of how the district runs. And we're out of time. If anyone anything else, please feel free to email us. We have a few more meetings coming up. So APAC is coming up next Thursday. Next Thursday? No, maybe it's a Tuesday. At February 6th at 5:15 p.m. Our next DPAC and then our DELAC meeting is February 9th at 9 a.m. And our next DPAC meeting is in about a month on February 23rd at 9 a.m. I want to thank you all for coming, and we will hopefully see you next month. Thanks so much.
Thank you, doctor.